Buckingham Palace is experiencing a rebellion due to the latest decision of King Charles III. Tucked away in the quiet English countryside, more than 90 miles west of the bustling streets of London, rests a manor that seems almost untouched by time. Highgrove House, with its sprawling grounds and meandering paths bordered by perfectly sculpted hedges and beds of roses in every imaginable shade, has long been a personal sanctuary for King Charles III. Once simply known as Prince Charles, he poured years of thought and care into designing this estate, not just as a residence, but as a living reflection of his lifelong passion for nature, sustainability, and order. Every tree, every vine, every blooming flower spoke of his desire to preserve beauty in a world that too often rushes past it. For older generations, it might bring back memories of the gardens our grandparents tended with pride, where every season had its charm and every plant had a story. But despite the beauty and elegance that Highgrove still offers at first glance, a quiet discontent has been growing beneath its carefully maintained surface. It's a story not often told in royal broadcasts or glossy magazine features, but it is one that now threatens to disturb the very image of the king himself. According to recent reports from The Times, one of Britain's most respected newspapers, the people who care for Highgrove's garden, the very soil, hedges, and blossoms that give this home its soul, are walking away. In just 3 years, 11 out of the 12 professional gardeners employed to maintain the estate's pristine grounds have left their posts, a statistic that would be worrying in any workplace, let alone one directly linked to the British monarchy. Now, to anyone who has ever worked the land, whether tending a vegetable patch in the backyard or helping their father haul bales of hay on a family farm, the quiet dignity of a gardener's life is something sacred. It's hard work, but it is honest, and there's a kind of peace that comes from working with your hands in the earth, watching things grow under your care. But what happens when even in such a peaceful profession, the joy begins to slip away? That's the question echoing from the flower beds of Highgrove. The primary reason for the mass departure, as it turns out, is not entirely shocking low wages. These days, we all know what it means when someone gives their best and still feels underpaid. One of the former workers put it plainly: there's an unspoken rule that you should feel privileged just to serve the royal household, as if gratitude alone could keep a roof over your head or put food on the table. It's a sentiment that many from older generations will recognize, having grown up in times when loyalty and humility were expected, even when pay was meager and recognition rare. But as times change, so too does the need for fairness and respect in all professions, even those tied to crowns and castles. Yet the issue goes deeper than salary. Behind the gates of Highgrove, a culture of perfectionism appears to have taken root, one that has sown more frustration than inspiration. According to those familiar with the matter, King Charles III has become extremely exacting when it comes to the details of his gardens. Every flower must be in its place. Every leaf must be trimmed just so, and every gardener must know not only their tools, but the Latin names of the plants they tend. One story especially has made the rounds. It's said that a gardener was dismissed on the spot simply because he failed to recall the proper name of a specific flower. Witnesses recall the king saying without hesitation, "Get that man out of my sight." It's the kind of moment that leaves an imprint, especially on those who have always associated royal leadership with grace and measured words. And it wasn't just knowledge of flowers that became a test. Reports suggest that internal communications among staff have been subjected to language corrections from the king himself, creating an environment that feels more like a classroom than a workplace. While a pursuit of excellence can be admirable, especially in someone charged with upholding centuries of tradition, it becomes stifling when it replaces encouragement with criticism. For the gardeners at Highgrove, what was once a calling became over time a burden. They had signed on to nurture life and beauty, but instead found themselves navigating a maze of demands that left little room for humanity. And now, with so many having left, the consequences are beginning to show. The gardens that once drew praise from environmentalists and tourists alike are showing signs of neglect. Weeds emerge where once there were none. Borders once sharp have softened. The gentle hum of satisfied workers has quieted. In response to the crisis, the King's Foundation, an organization that oversees many of his charitable and private affairs, commissioned an audit in late 2023. The goal was simple: assess the situation and recommend changes. And to their credit, proposals were made, including promises of better pay and improved working conditions. But as of the latest reports, little has changed. Promises remain just that, words on paper. Meanwhile, Highgrove's garden, once the crown jewel of Charles's vision for sustainable living and royal grace, risks becoming a symbol of mismanagement and discontent. For Americans who grew up hearing about the dignity of the British royals, and who might still recall the day of Queen Elizabeth's coronation, or watched Princess Diana walk down the aisle on a small black and white television set, this story feels different. It's not the grand scandals of palace intrigue or tell-all interviews. It's about something more quietly telling. It's about the people who make the image possible, who trim the hedges and sweep the pathways, and what happens when their quiet labor is overlooked or undervalued. There's a deep American respect for the working person, especially among the older generation. Many of you reading this may have spent decades at a job, perhaps with calloused hands or aching feet, doing what needed to be done day in and day out. You know what it means to be part of something bigger, to take pride in your work, even when no one's watching. And perhaps that's why this story matters, not just because it involves a king, but because it reminds us of a truth that spans all countries and titles. No one is too royal to listen, too grand to say thank you, or too important to show kindness. In the end, a garden is more than a display of wealth or taste. It is a testament to care. And the finest gardens, like the strongest families or the most enduring friendships, are built not on control or perfection, but on mutual respect, understanding, and a willingness to grow together. As King Charles III looks out across the lawns of Highgrove, he may see flowers that bloom because of the seasons, but it is the people, the unseen hands behind every blossom, who make those seasons possible. Perhaps it's not too late for His Majesty to reconsider, to step down from the pedestal of expectations and walk slowly and with humility through the very garden he loves, not as a ruler, but as a man among men, with ears open to the soft, quiet voices that have long gone unheard. In many ways, Highgrove itself has come to represent more than a royal residence. It is a living monument to the values King Charles has long tried to embody: environmentalism, preservation, balance between tradition and innovation. The very soil of the estate was once celebrated in newspaper columns and documentaries as an example of organic farming done right, of heritage preserved through careful stewardship. Visitors would marvel at the way the king spoke of compost of bees of old apple varieties brought back from near extinction. And for years it worked. The estate felt alive, not just because of the plants, but because of the people who made it thrive. Now those very people feel abandoned. It's a bitter irony, especially for those who remember when Charles was often called the Green Prince ahead of his time, in warning the world about climate change and ecological decay. Yet what use is love for nature if the human beings tending it feel broken? That question lingers especially now as the country faces broader concerns: economic pressures, rising living costs, and an aging workforce that deserves dignity. Among those who left Highgrove were older gardeners, some nearing retirement, who had served loyally for decades. They weren't just employees, they were keepers of the garden's memory. They remembered where a rare iris was planted by Princess Diana, or when the first hedgerow was shaped after Charles's return from a foreign visit. When those hands leave, they take something intangible with them, a sense of continuity, of quiet legacy passed from one season to the next. And what replaces them? Temporary workers, often young and inexperienced, who do their best but cannot restore what has been lost. For those of us in our 60s, 70s, or beyond, we understand how fragile heritage can be when not protected with care. We've seen factories shuttered, schools closed, crafts forgotten. We know that beauty built over decades can disappear in just a few seasons if neglected. And perhaps that's the greatest tragedy brewing beneath the roses of Highgrove. Not just the failing plants or the thinning staff, but the erosion of values once held: dear humility, gratitude, and the idea that leadership begins with listening. In the twilight years of a monarch's life, legacy becomes more important than ever. Not just the speeches or ceremonies, but how one treats those whose names may never be known to the public. A king is not only measured by his crown, but by the strength of the hands he lifts up. Highgrove still has a chance to bloom again, not just with petals and vines, but with human spirit. But it will require more than audits or pay raises. It will require a reckoning with the past and a recommitment to kindness. After all, gardens grow best where love is sown.